Okay, so we will get started. This is being recorded, and so we will circulate the recording afterwards for anyone that either joins late or doesn't manage to catch the whole thing. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the ASSC AGM. First ever virtual AGM. Normally, last year, it was the day before our conference. And what a different year it is this year, as we all know. We'll try and get through the AGM relatively quickly. If anyone has any questions, there is a Q&A button in the Zoom software at the bottom. Please use that to ask any questions, either relating to the AGM piece or the more interesting part of the call will be the sort of Q&A session that we'll have towards the end. So I am going to start off on the AGM piece. Melanie, if I get it wrong, please just jump in and tell me. It's not too complicated. So the first thing, we have had 70 apologies received and noted, as well as a number of proxy votes received. So thank you for people who most of are not here that sent in those proxy votes. Very important that we conduct the business of the AGM correctly. So thanks to those that have done that. First sort of point of order is to approve the minutes from last year's meeting held, as I say, in before the conference, the day before, evening before the conference. Melanie, I think we've already got proposers and seconders for that. So again, actually I can see someone has put a question in. Okay. So any questions that come up, please just let me know or let us know in the Q&A. If anyone has any questions relating to last year's minutes, please let us know. It was a fairly straightforward meeting last year. I'm going to stop that sharing just so it's a better view of us. Any matters arising from last year's, nothing has been raised in advance, so I'm assuming there are no more. Again, it was a fairly straightforward AGM last year, as it will be this year. So I'm going to jump into a brief chairman's report from my perspective. These notes have all been circulated, documents circulated prior to the event, but it was nice to sort of give a bit of an overview, given the year that we've had as an association. Everybody's suffered across the whole planet this year, or has been at least impacted one way or another by COVID, and no less self-catering in Scotland has had significant series of challenges. I don't need to tell you all that. We've seen sort of constantly, and we're still faced with them, changing UK and Scottish government regulations, guidelines, lockdowns, whatever you want to call it, tiers, levels. It's confusing, and it has been confusing right from the very start. And really, I think this is the key, where we as a sector here in Scotland have been so lucky to have the ASSC. Really, where there was all of the confusion, complication, lack of information, Fiona and her team have worked tirelessly all this time to get that information out to us, to lobby the government to make sure we get that information. And that has been absolutely invaluable to our sector. So it's been a massive massive disruption, and will remain so into 2021, but because we've got that strong trade association, the ASSC established more than 40 years ago, it has really served our sector well. And I think we can all look at examples of business sectors that perhaps haven't had that strong, cohesive body of representation, and where they may have suffered slightly more than we have. Before the COVID thing struck, the ASSC was already making great strides as being a lobbying organization, really making great connections with government and all the people that matter. COVID has really strengthened that. And so we have fantastic links all the way through different levels of government and other relevant bodies. And that's really setting us well for the future. The future is going to be complicated. We've got more potential regulations coming to us, well, actually even this year, but starting this year, but definitely into next year. Huge amount of lobbying work going on at the moment on that. And no time have we needed a strong trade association more. So it's absolutely fantastic that we've now got an increased membership, and there's better and more robust links with the people that matter. So our trade association, your trade association, is really, really in a good place to represent us through these difficult times with short-term rental regulations. I just want to sort of, from my perspective, and I'm sure everyone on call will share this, to thank the team who have done an amazing job to, particularly back in the earlier times of COVID, where they genuinely were just completely rushed off their feet in ways which I don't think could have been imagined previously, and supporting you all, providing information, lobbying the government and other bodies, providing personal support to huge numbers of members and non-members, providing that information. So really, really appreciate it, and thank you on behalf of all the members to the team. During the summer, our previous chair, Linda Batterson, who'd been the chair for 3 years, stepped down and I took over. And I just wanted to thank Linda for her work over the last few years. Particularly, we've moved from being a much more straightforward membership association to a more structured limited liability organization. And Linda was very, very helpful and instrumental in doing that. And so thanks to Linda for all of her hard work. And I look forward to my period as chair, as we look forward to building on and retaining the boost in members that we've received through COVID, and supporting you all in different and better ways over the next year or two. So that's really going to be my priority as chair, is to really work on the structure of the ASSC, work on the sort of looking towards the future. We have a membership of around 1,000 members now, massive change, and it's going to let us support you all in different and better ways. My final thing, we aren't changing the fees this year. The ASSC represents amazing value for money. As we move into early next year, we'll be looking to for renewals. We've got short-term rental regulations, continuing COVID stuff. Please make sure you do all renew your memberships. We really, really need that support as we continue to face challenges in the sector. So thank you all. Thank you to the team. And I'm going to hand over now to Fiona for her report, and then we'll sort of carry through the last procedural bits of the AGM and get into the Q&A.
Thanks very much indeed, Robert. Good morning, everybody, and thanks a lot for coming along today. Back in January, I had an optimistic and ridiculously romantic notion that 2020 was going to be a bit calmer than the last few years. Well, that was silly of me. We had the proposals for short-term legislation on the table, as well as tourist tax. But we had our ducks in a row and we were ready to fight. We published 2 policy papers back in February and March, and we were actively engaging with the Scottish Government and the short-term let delivery group. And we thought it was going to be a tough enough year just with that. But then, of course, COVID-19 arrived. We all know that coronavirus has posed an unprecedented challenge to the entire tourism sector, including self-catering. From the outset of the pandemic and the introduction of lockdown, the self-catering sector as a whole has demonstrated considerable leadership and perseverance as we responsibly closed our businesses, often at great personal and, of course, financial cost. Individual self-caterers demonstrated leadership by providing free and discounted accommodation for key workers, and I thank every one of you that did that. Throughout the pandemic, I think we have successfully fought the corner of our members, keeping you informed of unfolding developments over multiple platforms and engaging with leading tourism stakeholders, some of whom are with us today, MSPs and the Scottish Government, to ensure the best possible outcome for our sector. I'm not going to go through my entire Chief Exec's report. We'd be here for months. It's about 20 odd pages. It's published on the website and it'll be in the public area of the website later on today. Do take a read because it kind of shows exactly what we have been up to as a team over the last 9 months or so. The road's open, but there's real and damaging potholes to navigate. As you'll know, we've issued a series of surveys this year. Thank you so much to each and every one of you who've responded to these surveys. We have had in excess of 5,000 responses to our surveys. They've completely informed our discussions with the Scottish Government and industry colleagues and underpinned all of those conversations with empirical and incredibly valuable data. So thank you. Our latest survey, which you will probably know about, assessed the impact of the Scottish Government's COVID-19 restrictions last week. We enlisted 999 responses in just 24 hours. Just 7% of businesses say that they're seasonal, which is really interesting because I think there's a perception that self-catering industry is a seasonal sector. The vast majority do not close over the winter in normal circumstances. Now, obviously, that has completely changed this year. And it's fair to say that there is a massive COVID-19 effect on the seasonality of the self-catering sector just now. A lot of people are blaming the one household rule, but most people are blaming travel restrictions within Scotland for the loss of demand. We're going to be publishing these responses and the report later on today, but some really upsetting findings. Now, of course, there's the Strategic Framework Business Fund, which is offering support to businesses which are legally required to close or to modify their operations. Self-catering businesses, however, in levels 1, 2, or 3, which are affected by travel restrictions and loss in demand, are not eligible for this support. Now, we will, of course, continue conversations with the Scottish Government about financial support, but these have been ongoing since September and we're not seemingly getting anywhere just at the moment, but do not fear, we will not stop trying. So what next? In terms of our organisation, the ASSC membership has grown significantly over the past year and now stands at over 1,100 professional and dedicated self-catering operators, further amplifying the voice of the sector that generates well over £723 million to the Scottish economy per year. We've just commissioned a new economic impact assessment, which we're doing in association with the Professional Association of Self-Caterers down in England. And that's going to give us more up-to-date figures in the new year about the scale and impact of our sector. I'm hugely proud of what the small ASSC team of just 3 people plus Joyce has achieved over the last 9 months. We've had conversations late into the night, we've cried together and we've laughed together. The overtime put in by the team has been frankly mesmerising, but throughout it was driven by a passion and real commitment to support you, the self-catering sector. I'd also like to thank the ASSC board who continue to support the team and offer sage counsel. I need to thank our incredible public affairs team at Halogen Communications. They've been there at all hours of the day or night to offer me and the team advice and support, and to frankly temper me when it all gets too much and I want to rant to the press. And of course, thanks to Joyce at Crescent Events for leading the diversification from our annual conference and creating, driving and delivering our autumn talks sessions so seamlessly. I'm incredibly lucky to be surrounded by such an incredible team, all of whom I consider to be real friends. However, the ASSC is nothing without its members, and we value every single one of you. I hope that you believe that we have addressed the very real issues that have affected your businesses over the last torrid months. Thanks also to our partners for business and sponsors. We really can't function without them. Outside of the ASSC, but within Scottish tourism, we have built some lifelong connections. Again, 3 very good friends with us today, and we've strengthened relationships already there. If there's one thing that's positive that's come out of this pandemic, it's a mutual respect for many industry colleagues fighting for Scottish hospitality. Together we are stronger, and with common goals for the future, we can rebuild a better and more resilient tourism economy in Scotland. I'd like to thank those many colleagues who have supported the ASSC over the past year. We're going to carry on doing what we've been doing, responding to the challenges, responding to the changes. We need to work with the Scottish Government on the proposed licensing scheme, which frankly is not fit for purpose as it stands. But we are having conversations with the right people. I was very fortunate in being able to speak to the First Minister herself about this in November. We're still waiting for them to come back with any further updates on the possibility of postponing the legislation, but also waiting to see what the SSA looks like that is being proposed. We're going to carry on doing everything we possibly can to support the self-catering sector in Scotland, and we've been doing it pretty well since 1978. There's going to be challenges, there's going to be more difficulties, but we're going to carry on fighting. And we're going to help work towards making Scotland a leader in 21st century tourism for the benefit of all who live and visit our country. And that's all I'm going to say today, because I'm keen to get on to the fun bit, which is talking to Marc, Riddell and Caroline. But Mel, if I can hand back over to you to go through the rest of the procedural part of the AGM, that would be brilliant.
Thanks, Fiona. Good morning, everybody. Just to quickly run through the motions today as part of the AGM. Today we have 3 motions to confirm. If any member would like to comment on any of the motions highlighted on page 2 of the agenda, as we move through the details, please add your comments into the chat box during this session. If you're happy to approve one of the motions, please add your name to the chat box. Motion 1 is to approve the Board of Directors. The ASSC Board of Directors currently includes Robert Kennedy as Chair, Tara Scott as Vice Chair, Linda Batterson, Christine Ward, Geraldine Hamilton, Les Robinson, Barry Burton, Donald Dunlop and Naomi Alonso. As per our Articles of Association, 1/3 of the current board must step down at each AGM. Linda Batterson has given her notice to step down from the board. On behalf of the board, we send our sincere thanks to Linda for her work and contribution over her many years with ASSC. Thanks very much, Linda. Robert Kennedy and Tara Scott will also be stepping down and have expressed an interest and willingness to be re-elected. And I'm delighted to confirm we have 3 nominations for new directors. These are Adrian Carmichael from Strathard House in Skye, Nigel Pollard, Director at Discover Scotland in Dumfries and Galloway, and Angus Russell from Kelso in the Scottish Borders. I've received a proposer and seconder for these directors and therefore approve of the motion. Motion 2 to approve the accounts from the period of the 1st of February 2019 to the 31st of January 2020. I would like to introduce John Mason from Johnson Carmichael to say a few words on the accounts. John, over to you.
Thank you, Melanie, and good morning, everyone. just going to talk very briefly over the accounts to the 31st of January 2020 for the association. The total income in the year was very similar to 2019 at just over £190,000. That is made up primarily of the subscriptions that you all pay and also the income generated from the annual conference. The costs of running the association were just over £180,000, and that leaves a small surplus in the year of just over £11,000, and that compares to a deficit of £8,500 last year. So the message in these figures is that is some stability and some consistency in terms of the membership and of the income and the expenditure within the organisation. There is no corporation tax to pay since the company qualifies as being exempt from corporation tax as an association. So the fact that there's a surplus for the year does not mean there's any tax to pay. Turning briefly to the balance sheet, if you are able to look at the accounts, the balance sheet is really quite straightforward. What I would note is that at January 2020, there was a healthy £72,000 in the bank, and the liabilities for the association at that point were relatively low, just about £24,000, made up mainly of VAT and PAYE and national insurance, so nothing irregular or out of kilter there. So the net assets of the association are just over £50,000 at January 2020, which is a modestly healthy position for the association. Looking forward, I think, as everyone knows, the membership has increased, and I think there is a good opportunity for the association to post an improvement in the figures in the year to January 2021. But that's all I'd like to say around the accounts just at the moment, Melanie, if that's okay.
Thanks very much, John. I've received a proposer and a seconder for approval of the accounts, and therefore I can confirm approval of this motion. Just to add, for motion 1, we do have an additional board member already with us that I forgot to mention, which is Claire Winskill from the Isle of Skye. So sorry, Claire, about that. Finally, moving to motion 3, to elect Johnson Carmichael as accountants to the end of the financial year 2021 to 2022. I've received a proposer and seconder for approval of the accounts, and therefore confirm approval of this motion. This year we do not have a motion regarding the membership subscription rates, as the ASSC board has decided to retain membership rates. Therefore, the annual membership subscription will remain at £129 plus VAT, and this equates to just £35 per day, 35 pence per day, sorry. Marketing agency and partner membership rates are also being retained. We would like to thank you and all ASSC members for your support this year. As a small team, we simply cannot operate without your membership contributions and industry partnership support. The engagement and relationships we have built with our members and industry over the past few years is invaluable. Your support will be even more important next year to help us through recovery and any unforeseeable challenges that lie ahead. We will continue to develop opportunities for members, keeping you regularly informed with whether that's via a newsletter or in interesting ASSC talks going forward. And we will continue to provide you with the tools to support you and your business into 2021. And just to finish, I'd like to mention our valued partners for business that we work closely with and get support from, which is Bruce Stevenson, Cumberland Business, DM Hall, Discover Scotland, Gilson Gray, HJR Tax Consultants, Interhome, Noise Aware, Quality and Tourism, Super Control and VRBO. Our Trade Supplier Plus are Air DNA, Cleaner EV, EQ Accountants, Landlord's Little Helper, Solway Water Management, and our ASSC Talk sponsor, Tunnocks. All of these provide valuable support to ASSC. And that's all from me. Thank you. And over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you, John. I think essentially we can conclude the AGM part and move on to the Q&A session. The only questions we've received in the chat here have been basically questions of support and gratitude for the work that's been done. And just to echo that again, it's been a very challenging year for our team at the ASSC, and they've come through it amazingly well and supported you all, and will continue to do so in the future. So any questions following up this, any detailed questions, just contact either myself or any of the team. I'm more than happy to answer them. Hoping surely this time next year we'll be gathering for our AGM and hopefully even a conference again. We will see what happens in the future, but it'll be very nice to actually see everyone next year. So I'm going to hand back to Fiona now to introduce our panel of speakers and get to the more interesting part of the session where we look at some of the challenges that are facing us. Again, if any of you have any questions in this section, please just ask away in the questions button in the Zoom thing. Over to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Robert. Panel, if you'd like to put your webcams on, that would be brilliant. I'm absolutely delighted this morning to be joined by some true titans of Tartan tourism. Riddell Graham, who's Director of Industry and Destination Development at Visit Scotland, Marc Crothall, CEO of the Scottish Tourism Alliance, and Caroline Millar of the Hideaway Experience, but also Scottish Agritourism. Riddell is responsible for leading a tourism team of over 300 staff at Visit Scotland that deliver services, advice and support to 3 distinct customers. Information to 2 million visitors annually through the network of 26 eye centres. Also leading on the quality assurance star rating schemes and engaging, of course, with national and local stakeholders. He also has a responsibility for leading the organisation's responsible and inclusive tourism activity. Marc, I'm sure you'll all know, was appointed the Chief Executive of the STA in 2012. He recently chaired the National Strategy Steering Group that was charged with developing and overseeing Scotland's future tourism strategy, Scotland Outlook 2030, which was launched at the beginning of March 2020. That feels like a million lives ago, and has already had a COVID overlay. I worked with Marc on that document. He's also the leading industry representative on the Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group, STERG, and the Scottish Government's Tourism Task Force. Caroline Millar is the lead of Scottish Agritourism. This is the new sector body. She's represented agritourism in the STA Council for the past 6 years. But in 2020, an informal network of agritourism businesses came together and became a more formal sector body, sitting under the umbrella of the STA. Caroline's got high hopes for what agritourism can deliver in terms of a green economic recovery out of COVID, and hopes that agritourism could be measured and grow to the scale it is in other countries. I've worked with the 3 of our panelists incredibly closely over the last 9 months, and yeah, we've had some emotional times and laughs and cried and all sorts of things, but it's been amazing working with you. So today, news of the vaccine, almost certainly impacting on consumer confidence. Maggie and William Shakespeare, who can make that up, have had theirs this morning. Panel, do we think that this could be the beginning of some form of green shoot? Riddell, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In terms of confidence, there are 2 sides to the equation. One is the consumer demand, and the other one is the ability of businesses to operate. I spoke to our crystal ball gazer in Visit Scotland, Chris Greenwood, and asked him what that might mean for the future. And he was suggesting that subject to the rollout working and subject to the rollout not being impacted by irresponsible behaviour by people in the community, following the guidelines as much as possible, then he saw a real opportunity from Easter onwards to return to where we were probably at the beginning of July. Still elements of uncertainty, but I think much more positive outlook than I would have said 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I hope that translates through into consumer confidence. We're ready to go in terms of our marketing activity when it's safe to do so. And we'll certainly be there stimulating demand for all sectors, but particularly for self-catering.
Good stuff. Mark, what about you? From the whole tourism industry, how are things looking?
Yeah, I think echo Riddell's comments there. I think Jason Leach, as much as some of us have come to love and hate him and what he says, is actually being very level-headed around his communications around the vaccine. Is obviously a massive day, but you know, it's still dependent on the amount of vaccine we get in and the deployment of the vaccine and how we get it in. I mean, hospitality tourism is probably the opportunity now, given the age profile being vaccinated first or that demographic. But yeah, we have to, you know, take the positive, but all the indicators still point towards, you know, very much a local recovery in the early part of the summer, and it's probably more likely the autumn before we see any real international movement. But you know, this has got to be good news. But you know, the whole piece about responsible and being responsible, you know, one of my questions, what would I want on my Christmas list? You know, I just want people to behave responsibly. So those of us that are, which is the majority, don't end up suffering as a result of the ill doings of others. But it's a good day. We have to take it in that light and really push on, but make sure we build back stronger.
Indeed. And Caroline, I suppose from our point of view with agritourism, many agritourism businesses having a self-catering element, do you think we are going to be back in the sort of July position, as Mark says, that we will be able to bounce back first?
I think there's two things. One is I haven't, through speaking to many people, both consumers and self-catering operators, I haven't really come across anyone who's found a consumer that's lacking in confidence in staying in self-catering, particularly in rural areas. And we've seen increased demand for people to come, particularly to the countryside, both for days out and for overnight stays. So I think, you know, this is a significant step forward with the vaccine. I haven't seen any evidence of lack of demand for people coming to the countryside. And I think as soon as we're allowed to be open and accept people from the domestic market and subsequently after that an international market, we're going to be very busy.
Here's hoping, huh?
Can I just come in there?
Yeah.
It was great to see Caroline's brother, Jim Smith, volunteer himself to do the vaccination. He said he's doing about 200 sheep a day, and he's happy to step up and do the human element as well if there was need.
Yeah, I think we should definitely take him up on that. It'd be hysterical. we all need a laugh, let's face it. Riddell, there's been quite a few questions recently about the STIRG, so Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group. Can you give us a bit more insight into what STIRG has been doing, and I suppose specifically for the self-catering sector, and also where you think Visit Scotland is going to be placed to support self-catering going forwards?
Yeah, I well remember the first meeting of STIRG in the boardroom of Visit Scotland on the 16th of March, when a cast of thousands appeared on the call, and it was pretty evident that there was a lot of anger then and a lot of uncertainty. And I think the right decision was taken to slim the group down, with the voice of the industry being represented by Marc and Karen acting as the secretariat, and the key public agencies around the table linked into the Scottish Government tourism team. Huge amount of work over the period, and funnily enough, I was having a look at the action plan, and if people on the call haven't had a look at that, can I suggest they do? It's on visitscotland.org. There's a huge amount in there, looking back over the past 9 months, quite incredible. Not all necessarily from the individual members around the table, but the support packages, the research, the advice, support, information, the marketing activity, whatever. So a lot of work there. Specifically in terms of the support that STEG's given to self-catering, I think it's been very much listening to your concerns and trying to make sure through the channel, but there's loads of channels, that there is a clear ask. And I think one of the concerns that Scottish Government guys have had is that because folk have been lobbying from all over, individuals contacting ministers, then the message is quite often mixed. And so we've been trying to make sure that through Marc and the fantastic job that Scottish Tourism Alliance has done, that there's a clear message. These are the asks. But I think it was hugely frustrating last Thursday. We had an hour-long call. We have one every Thursday morning. 45 minutes of that call was spent trying to clarify with the Scottish Government tourism team all the issues that you had raised earlier in the day based on all the feedback you've had. What is concerning from our point of view is that there are decisions being taken quite rightly from a health point of view that haven't thought through the unintended consequences on businesses. And so your list of, I don't know how many questions you had that you fired to us that we managed to get answers to, is something that Marc and I have been lobbying really strongly on. Let's not wait till that happens. Let's prejudge it and make sure that the communication has already taken that on board. So to answer your question, Sterg has really been listening and trying to make sure that your voice is heard really strongly. You very kindly, as ever, provided us with feedback on the performance of Sterg, and Fiona, thank you for that. Blunt as ever. And I think one of the points that was made was that you wanted to be closer to what was going on there. And so we've instigated a fortnightly meeting involving the key sector organisations and Sterg to have you in the loop. You ask about Visit Scotland. We have bid in for additional marketing funding, and within that, additional very specific sector marketing support funding, which I hope we get success on. The runes are that it could be positive, but we've not heard yet. And that will, I hope, provide you with the support package you've been asking for in terms of improving your back office function, enhancing the Embrace website, and also your presence on VisitScotland.com. And again, thank you for your input to the future of quality, which we're looking at the moment, because I think that there's an opportunity there for you to have a bigger role in the future of self-catering quality assurance criteria that we've been operating on for the past 20, 30 years. So a lot happening there, but just because of you, and I want to say this so that your members are aware, and the lobbying you've carried out, but the evidence base that you've provided, and I think that's the big thing that I've noticed, that you don't just respond, you respond with the evidence from 900 businesses who've given you that. That makes it a hell of a lot easier for us to argue your case rather than anecdotal evidence which comes to me from all over the place, and it's my personal view. So just thank you for your ongoing input to the work at Sterg.
Well, thank you. I mean, it has been a pleasure, and it genuinely has been a pleasure working with all the different tourism bodies and stakeholders, and Marc and you, Riddell, and you, Caroline. It really, I mean, genuinely, we feel like we are being heard. It's my job to represent the sector, and I hope that we are doing that appropriately. And as you say, evidence speaks volumes, and I think that's always where I come at it from. So thank you for helping get our word across to those that need to listen to. Marc, the Scottish Tourism Alliance, moving into 2021 and getting deeper into what has become known as the third winter for Scotland's Tourism Alliance, what realistically should we be hoping for to put the tourism sector on the road to recovery with a view to being able to trade viably come spring?
Well, I think Fiona, and I first echo Riddell's comments there. I think, you know, the relationship that we've established or strengthened over the last 9 months has been, you know, fantastic. And it's not obviously just with yourselves. I think the core trade bodies it's by coming together as we did with the council, being able to gather that evidence and feed in, rather than having, you know, lots of individuals lob in bombs into the bureaucratic pot of civil servant inbox. But you know, that said, it's by no means job done, and the very front you know, sort of immediate recommendations of the Tourism Task Force was still to talk about rescue and recovery, and to bridge the gap that we find ourselves in now of 3 to 4 months of challenge, making sure that our assets are still in situ and ready to build on that recovery up again. And, you know, hopefully for many that will be in the spring. But we heard from Fergus Ewing last week, who, you know, attended our roundtable, got Brexit on, which was all about Brexit, which of course we can't ignore, is still going to have an impact on the sector as well. But I was encouraged by his comments to say that the task force paper that had been presented to the cabinet on the day before had been well received, and there was and is a package of supplementary support being pulled together. Not as we speak, I think finalised. I think the challenge is around its prior to its announcement is that we know, we've said loudly, that whatever gets announced must be robust in its communication, must be very clear. We don't, like you and I and others have had to field in the past, end up with hundreds and different of questions needing to be answered, can find its way through. So he did say that there is that support package coming, and whether it's the end of this week, it will get announced, or the beginning of next week, that will be good. And that will really set immediate sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Will start the light at the end of the tunnel to shine a bit brighter. And those early parts, January, February, March, it is about thinking around, how do we make sure we capitalise on the future markets that, you know, are signposted and will be targeted by Scotland? And I've just come off a webinar with Vicky Millar, and it's a brilliant marketing plan given the constraints that we've got in front of us. But I think what I genuinely believe, what I'm hearing, I think there's going to be a huge amount, or an even greater amount, of expectation on quality of experience. I mean, we've got to remember a lot of people have lost a lot of money, and there are those that will have a much more make much more conscious decisions about how they choose to spend their money, and therefore that value for money experience and what can we be doing differently in quality will really be, I think, top of everybody's thinking before they actually make that commitment to buy. So rebuilding and thinking what we can all do in the industry in terms of product, and actually how we can shape it to fit the future, will be critical in that early part. But we need that package of support delivered in, and the reassurance that's going to come, because the mood music coming from Westminster is very definitely, I think there won't be much more coming out of the Treasury. The words from Nigel Huddleston at last week's Tourism Industry Council was, the sector's done well enough, you know, and I think with the vaccine now underway, there may be less of a foot on the pedal from the Treasury to support the sector as a whole. And, you know, the upshot of that means there will be less of a consequential, if any, coming through to Scottish Government. So what we get now could be it, and we've got to make the most of it.
Well, it's good to know that they're still considering, and all is not lost. I got a letter from Kate Forbes yesterday, which was not terribly hopeful, but I will remain optimistic. That is my middle name. Talking of optimism, Caroline, somebody's asked here that a large number of people from basically the new domestic market have started coming to Scottish countryside for the first time in 2020 because they couldn't get to Spain. What are the opportunities for self-catering in rural areas around this? I mean, this has to be a positive.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few negative impacts of that, and sort of media around the sort of the shift of people last summer coming to the countryside, people that wouldn't normally be in the countryside. But I take it as a very, very positive shift, that some of our domestic people that are from Scotland, maybe mostly possibly urban residents, are exploring Scotland and loving Scotland in a way that they didn't normally do. So I see that as a huge opportunity for us. I think the messaging and the communications around how to stay safe in the countryside, where to go, you know, if you're talking about 70% of Scotland is farmland, and so, you know, as farmers, we want people to come and, you know, they can walk on our land, absolutely, but, you know, making sure they stick to path, they know the dangers around walking through fields of cows and calves, take your rubbish home with you. So that whole sort of how to, you know, come and welcome you in the countryside, but please, this is how, this is why you need to do these things in the countryside. But it's a huge opportunity, not just for agritourism, but for all rural tourism and hospitality businesses, self-catering and things. Also as well, we're seeing a big interest and shift in people buying from farmers direct. So a bigger interest in local food and drink. And so, you know, the shift has to be around come and stay in self-catering, but the self-catering owner, operator, doing a lot more to link people up with local butchers, farm shops, restaurants that sell local produce, etc., and kind of having that whole experience put together that's really easy for people. So I think it's a huge opportunity, and what we want to do is make sure that people that are shifting to explore Scotland on a more regular basis, that's not just a short-term thing for 2021. We want a shift in behaviour that continues on.
No, that's absolutely right. And I think, you know, huge opportunities. And I think this is a real opportunity to kind of take a look at our businesses and go, right, how can we do this better? And it goes back to what Riddell was saying and Marc was saying. People are going to be looking for quality. They're going to be looking for provenance. They're going to be looking for all this kind of collaborative working and helping local economies survive through this. So I think there's huge opportunities. Slightly less optimistic question here from David. As a sector, self-catering has been in the gun sights of the Scottish Government for a while, before the pandemic, throughout the pandemic, and government continues to press on despite united opposition from senior tourism organisations with a costly and difficult licensing scheme. ASSC has had to fight hard every inch of the way representing us, but everything seems to be a major battle, with businesses feeling unfairly treated by the government that despite everything does not seem to understand our sector. While recognising that other sectors are having terrible struggles, can the panel give self-catering businesses any solace to quell their growing anger and exasperation? That's a bit of a technical one. We were always going to get hit by questions about licensing. Licensing is the single biggest threat to our sector, other than COVID and possibly Brexit. And it is something that I'm working incredibly hard on with Marc and Riddell and other stakeholders to try and, well, at the moment we're just trying to postpone the legislation, but is there anything that we can say to kind of give people a little comfort that we're not just being thrown tomatoes at as a sector?
If I can just try and initially answer that. I mean, we have been 100% behind exactly what the ASSC has been saying all the way through, which is unusual for a public body to put its head above the parapet, because we are, in effect, an arm of government in that we're funded by them. But we felt so strongly about this issue in particular that we felt it was right that we got in behind you. And the main reason for that was exactly what I said earlier on. You provided the evidence. And I think all the documents that you produced were absolutely compelling. So a lot of our lobbying, we don't do above the line. We don't do publicly for obvious reasons, but we've been working very hard behind the scenes to make sure that the messages that you've been putting out are trying to get to the right people as well. We totally believe that this is unnecessary for the whole of Scotland, and that it absolutely should be postponed, and that there are certain areas we know that are under pressure, and we recognise that, but there are ways around that. I think your case has been strengthened by the fact that you've doubled your membership over the past 9 months, which gives you a much louder voice in this space. And all I can say is that we are completely supportive of the line you're taking, and we'll continue to do that as much as we can behind the scenes.
Thanks, Riddell. It is really tough, and I mean it's not helped by media hype. There was a piece in the Times this weekend about, you know, how Airbnb is desperately needing to be regulated. Well, if everybody actually believes what that narrative is, then, well, that's why we've ended up where we are. But we are continuing to fight, and as Riddell says, continuing to give the evidence the Scottish Government needs to try and kind of navigate our way through these proposals, which at the moment are looking very difficult to deal with, if I'm honest. Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, Fiona, I mean, obviously, as Riddell said, you know, the signatories that we gathered together to get on the letter from the other trade national organisations such as CBI, SCDI, FSB. I sit on a weekly business organisation meeting with those trade bodies, and it was an easy request in some respect, because every one of those organizations recognize the importance of tourism recovery and actually not having barriers in the way, and the importance of having a product that is attractive, will attract people into Scotland to stay here and spend money in the economy. So not one of those organizations, I think, were hesitant about putting their name to that. So that has to be a really strong point. The very fact that we were able to express the view personally to the First Minister, she's listened. Obviously, we followed up again in her letter with more considerations. Unfortunately, I think the vaccine and everything else is deflecting from the focus on that. But we have to hold our heads up and remain confident that the right decision will be arrived at, or certainly we will be allowed collectively as a sector, with the backing of Visit Scotland and others, to shape the right outcome, rather than actually just kill something that is hugely important to the recovery and the visitor economy as a whole.
Yeah.
Can I just add the fact that you've got Russell Griggs on your side, not as chairman of the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency, but as the chairman of the Regulatory Review Group, which was introduced 5-6 years ago to minimise the amount of red tape and regulation that was going to be put in the way of industry. So the fact that he's speaking on your behalf, I mean, I saw his very well articulated letter to the powers that be, means that you have the right people on your side, as Mark says. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it will be a political decision, as you well know, but we're clearly there trying to influence as much as we can the outcome.
Well, no, that's brilliant. Russell's become a very good friend of the ASSC over the last 9 months. I worked with him very closely back in the day when I thought energy performance certificates were a challenge. Anyway, never mind. No, Russell's been brilliant. And as you say, I don't think we can have done anything more in terms of trying to deal with this licensing proposal. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. We've had a few specific questions about sort of very detailed things to do with planning and licensing, which I think I will probably collate an answer and post up as a news piece rather than going into the detail right now. But as I say, as soon as we hear anything about it, we will tell everybody. What lessons, this is to everybody, what lessons do you think we can take from 2020 in terms of how we view our tourism industry, the offering, and indeed tourism, indeed Scotland as a domestic holiday destination? Caroline, I'll come to you first.
I think one of the first lessons, or there's always good comes out of things, but certainly at a more business to business level, certainly this crisis has really developed and forged brilliant relationships between sector leads, sector bodies in Scotland, destination marketing areas, the STA, Visit Scotland, and I mean we've had tremendous support from Visit Scotland with marketing and things like that. So I think that we always did work well together, but through a crisis, we've had to really come together and collaborate and work well. So there's that side of things. I think on the business front, yeah, I mean, people have had to be more innovative in their ways that they've marketed their businesses. I'll give one example from our sector. We obviously went very quickly live with daily llamathon updates from farms around Scotland, and then different farms, and that's continued on. But we did have a run of 100 days without a stop in a live farm tour, and that, I think, you know, we 15% of our audience from America, 10% from Canada, 7% from South Africa. These people can't come and visit Scotland just now, but I mean, some of them are serial followers of Go Rural's Facebook page. So I'm hoping that these people will put that in their itineraries for 2 or 3 years' time and come to Scotland, and that activity of that marketing will drive economic benefit. So I think that that's a definite positive, that we just had to turn things on their head and do things in a different way. But definitely the relationships and, you know, working so closely with yourself, Fiona, I just wanted to say what a phenomenal powerhouse you are for the whole of tourism in Scotland. And, you know, I hope you totally get a couple of weeks off at Christmas, because everybody in the ASSC members, I'm a member, I just wanted to pay tribute to everything you've done this year.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And I'd just like to say you guys have just been incredible in terms of the diversification of what you've been doing in terms of all those virtual farm visits and stuff. Has just been amazing. And as you say, it's given your members, and as well a lot of ASSC members, that kind of confidence and sense of community that's been really important. Marc, what good have you seen as a result of the pandemic in relation to how we as an industry have sort of coped and survived through it?
There we go. Well, I think a couple of lessons, some of the things, every day's been a learning day, no matter how old you are. And I'm 10 years to the day younger than Riddell, so I'll take that one. And it has been a learning day. I had no idea that I would find myself as a counsellor. And I had no idea there were more than 7 days in a week and more than 24 hours in a day, but I found that out to my penance. But you know, communication is king. We've actually spoken about that earlier. Communication and evidencing is absolutely been, you know, the absolute necessity at the heart of this. So gathering that intelligence in and being able to cement those relationships, I think it's highlighted the absolute importance of associations in our ability to be able to work across a spectrum of stakeholders as well as other agencies, and significantly the importance of leadership. You know, it's a learning curve. We've all had to lead in different ways and do different things, but you know, we're stronger for it. And I think the overarching piece for me is I think it's opened the eyes of many who didn't understand our industry. And you know, I say it time and time again, Gordon Dewar, Chief Executive of Edinburgh Airport, on our board, he thinks most people think tourism just happens. And I think there's a wake-up call to the world that tourism doesn't just happen. It is an economic driver. It has a lot of components to it. And when it doesn't happen, everybody suffers as a direct result. So, you know, that has got to be a win for us. And we have to take the positives from that and believe that, you know, the better comprehension and understanding around the importance of the sector, the stronger leadership we now have, the relationships that are more established, our communication skills, and the fact that there are potentially more than 7 days a week will only make us recover faster and bigger and better in the future.
Absolutely. Riddell, looking to the future, how do you see Scottish tourism recovering from the pandemic, and what does that mean for us as a sector?
Well, the one thing I need to just share is that it's great to know that Marc's only 23 years old, so that's a good move in the right direction. I would totally agree with what Marc's saying. I mean, I think I look back to foot and mouth disease in 2001. I was heavily involved in that in the borders, and that the unintended consequence. This was about farming, but actually a lot of the countryside had to close, and therefore a lot of tourism was impacted. So I think the reliance of tourism for the benefit of communities and local people has been shone very brightly there. You know, I've always said, if you get it right for a local community, you get it right for the visitor. I was on a call this morning with the Sky Connect guys, and the first question I was asked was about public toilets. and it really struck home that getting the basics right is something that we absolutely need to do, and quite often that's something that's kind of forgotten. So making sure that the basics are right in terms of the future, I think, is going to be really important. I think the future, you just need to look at our insights in terms of what consumers are talking about, nature and outdoors being more important, unique experiences, authenticity, luxury travel, very important indeed, and shorter planning and booking times. All these things enable the industry to focus on the things that they need to get right. Like Mark, I'm really confident. By nature, I'm a confident person. I always I try and see the positives. So I think the future is right. Inevitably, in situations like a pandemic, weaker organizations, weaker businesses will fall out. And it's not a very nice thing to say, but actually sometimes that is a good thing, because it then means that those that are left are much stronger. They've survived. They've been listening to what the consumer is saying, and they're in a much better position to cope with a future that is very different. So, that whole uncertainty piece is something that I think is going to be with us. And those that innovate and respond to that are going to be in a much stronger position in the future.
So it's not all bad. It's not all bad. And we've definitely got to harness a bit of optimism and positivity. And this is a good day to do that with the vaccine rolling out. And here's hoping it works as it's meant to. I'm conscious of time, so I think we better sort of wrap up. But thank you, Marc, Riddell and Caroline. Thanks so much for joining us today and giving us your wise words. As I say, any kind of specific questions that we haven't answered today, I will do so and publish them later on. But thank you so much. And I think, Robert, I'm going to hand back to you in case you've got any sort of final words, but thanks very much.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you to all of our speakers today. I just want to echo that feeling of confidence or positive feeling moving into 2021. I was actually analysing some forward booking data at the weekend, and forward bookings are looking good for 2021. I appreciate that many of you on this call have got bookings that have been deferred into 2021, but the forward booking situation is looking good. That means we've got a bit of a perfect storm coming, very low occupant availability and very high demand. So for the people joining us today, I think we are looking at a very positive year, a very strong year for domestic tourism generally, but self-catering is clearly going to benefit from that. We don't know when vaccines or whatever is going to start to pick up and when that might start to happen, but certainly we can say with confidence we're looking at a good year. So that, I think that's a perfect way to end today with that note of confidence looking forward. So thank you all for attending today and for attending all the other virtual events the ASSC has been holding over the last few months and will continue to do so. We will look forward to hopefully seeing you all in person at the next AGM next year. Thank you again to everyone, the speakers today, and we will keep supporting the ASSC and its members in the sector through this next phase as we get into 2021.
Thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye.